Welcome back, RuleVacantLand.com. This is Luke Smith, and I got a good question in the comments. Ruby Domain is saying, I'm wondering, how do you independently acquire vacant land that no one has ever owned previously? What about abandoned parcels from like 50 years ago that those people totally abandoned? Does the county reclaim it and auction it off? Thanks for the explanation. So I think that was a really good question. In the U.S., which all the land that's, or almost all the land that's for sale on RuleVacantLand.com is located, we have taxes, and we have taxes on the land. So land taxes, property taxes that are usually collected by the county. And some small scenarios, parts of it goes to the state, but it's mostly to the county. And at the county level, it's not federal taxes. It's not, well, there's city taxes in some places too, and little jurisdictional taxes. And the way it was set up, why it was set up that way in the U.S. is because a lot of people that came to the U.S. in the earlier days were coming from Europe, and Europe had a lot of properties with no tax that would sit around for 50 years or 150 years and be abandoned. They'd be owned by like one family, and they'd pass it on through the generations. And lots of times they didn't even keep track of it. They don't even really know what they own. And they'd be the land barons, and they would, they would rent that property out to the people who actually did the work, like the sharecroppers or the ones, whatever you call them, the ones doing the work on the servants, really, right? I'm gonna not have the right words. The people work in the land. And the people working the land would do all the labor, and they'd pay taxes. They'd pay taxes or fees to their land baron or whoever owned the land in the area. And they never really got to own their own land. And it was really hard to make that jump from being the one who worked the land to the one who owned the land. And a lot of land would sit around and not be worked. And a lot of these people really wanted a place to go work the land and turn it into something, grow whatever to help support their family and sell and become prosperous instead of just servants to the land and to the baron. And so we created taxes on the land with the idea that if the family that owns the land sits around and is lazy, eventually, and they don't keep track of it, eventually, if they don't pay the taxes, we'll know that they don't want it, and the county will take it away. Now, each one of these jurisdictions, sometimes it's state laws or county laws, they have, it's usually state laws and how much time it takes before the county can start taking it away and what that process is. In some places, they do deed sales, and they just auction off the properties to the highest bidder. Other places, they raise money to pay the taxes that are due, and then the person who is funding the taxes gets a lien on the property, and then they go foreclose later over time and get the land, and then they can go do what they want to do with it. So there's a process for that in each state, and some states are shorter timelines than others. So if you look at my little website here, RuleVacantLand.com, and I'll use this as an example. I just pulled up the map search on here, and there's a big chunk of properties right in here, because this is Arkansas, and Arkansas has 2 years. Like, if you don't pay the taxes in 2 years in Arkansas, the state, they deed the land to the state, and the state they give you warnings and everything, and then they auction it off. 2 years, I mean, the person might have just got a bad address, or they might have been bad health, or they might have been in jail, or they might have been, 2 years isn't that much time. Other states, I think more normal timelines in the U.S. is like 5 years for a lot of the states, but some states it's 10 and 20 years before anything really happens. Like Utah, I don't know if they ever really get around to it. Rarely ever do you ever see something go to tax auction in Utah, right? Like, it just doesn't happen. So there's extremes. Arkansas being one extreme, Utah being another extreme. And so that's how it's done in the U.S., and that keeps the properties in order. Now, if you've got a big estate of land, like maybe you own this whole valley in the picture behind me or something, and you're like, this stuff up the mountainside here, over here, it looks beautiful, but what the heck am I going to build on that? And, maybe back down in there, I could have some cattle and some buildings or something. Like, let's keep that part and let's get rid of this part, because I don't want to pay taxes on everything. And so the U.S. people have done that a lot. And so in the past, it was a lot easier to split properties. I split it off at this river and split it off at that fence and from this tree to that tree, and I'll sell it to you, or I give it away, turn it into a park or something. Just, I don't want to pay taxes on it. And, if you turn it into a park, you can still use it. No one's going to build there. You want to still look at the mountain, maybe even make a park that nobody can get to because they got to cross your land to get there. I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff like that that's happened throughout history in the U.S. Yeah, you want to get rid of the stuff that you're not using so you don't have to pay tax on it. Other times people do different uses, like they'll make it grazing land. They'll put cattle on it or something. And the tax base goes from like housing land to grazing land. I mean, 1/100th the tax fee or some like ridiculously low amounts of taxes if you figure out what kind of use your land is and get it set for that. So there's a lot of that jockeying that happens in the U.S. as well. So back to Ruby Domain's question. I'm wondering, how do you independently acquire vacant land that no one has ever owned previously? What about abandoned parcels? So I just touched abandoned parcels that somebody owns somewhere along the way. They're in the tax roll. And so it means that they've gone from United States government to, sometimes they go straight from the United States government to the local, homesteader, and they would be homesteaded properties. Other times they go from the federal government to the state, and then the state does their own homesteading they've done over time, and different states have done it in different time periods. Like Alaska was kind of the last one doing homestead properties, and they don't do them anymore that I know of. It's been maybe 10, 15 years since they stopped doing homesteading that I know of. And so that was how you would get in the past land that nobody had ever used before. It's never been owned before by an American citizen. Maybe it was owned by the government or by natives before that or something, or Mexico or Russia or whoever. You go back in American history, France, Napoleon, and the Louisiana Purchase. Trying to think of what other deals the U.S. did, whatever other deals. So those would be properties that come from the government that you could acquire that no one has ever owned previously. Like they would be coming from the government. There's probably still some obscure government programs out there that I don't know about that you could get land from them, but not glaring obvious ones that I know about right now, not like the Homestead Acts of the past. And then there was another question: does the county reclaim it and auction off? Yeah, so it's different kinds of auctions in different areas. So some areas it's a deed auction where you get the actual deed to the property and the county did the foreclosure for you and kick the old owner out. And other times it's you're paying the taxes and then you're going through a court process to kick the old owner off the records to make it into your name, solid and secure into your name. And so different parts of the U.S. it's different regulations and different legal paths to pull that off. Yeah. And so that's my understanding of land in the U.S. If you have more questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I'll try to answer them over time. And thank you. Thanks for asking. Thanks for watching. Thanks for following along. And I'll keep making videos about different properties on ruralvacantland.com, ones we have up for sale. Thanks. See you in the next one. Bye.